Hey guys, what's happening? So for this one, we are getting into the full story of Wolverine Revenge, written by Jonathan Hickman and illustrated by Greg Capullo, who are undoubtedly two of the best to ever do it. So if you're enjoying these videos, be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications. Alright, so going into Wolverine Revenge, this starts out in the Savage Land in Antarctica. And all we really know heading into this is that 10 days ago, Magneto's space station asteroid M came crashing down into the atmosphere. And while it was burning up upon re-entry, Magneto would breathe his last breath, and when he died it released the largest EMP in the history of mankind. And ever since, the northern hemisphere has been dark. So 10 days later, when we head over to the Savage Land, we see a group of zebra people searching for a great beast. And as it turns out, they're accompanied by Wolverine. And just right away, with this starting in the Savage Land and us seeing the zebra people here, this story already has an old school feel to it, because we really don't see or hear much about the zebra people that often. But nonetheless, as they're searching for this great beast, these guys are like, we gotta be brave, our people are counting on us. And Wolverine's just like, I guess you're lucky I was in the neighborhood. But it isn't too long before one of them sees that the beast is nearby. And as soon as they do, they just take off running. So for a moment, Wolverine's just like, yeah, that's how it goes. So much bark and so little bite. And as soon as he says that, the Triceratops he came riding in on, it catches a whole lot of bite. So next, Wolverine takes this thing head on, and it just chomps down on him. So with half of his body in its mouth, he starts tearing those gums up. So for a moment here, he's just like, yeah, that's what happens when you run into something meaner than you. Because just before this, the hunters were telling him how after the sky flashed with that bright purple light 10 days ago, things changed, because prior to that, the great beast would hunt deep in the jungle and leave them alone. And they told Wolverine after the sky flashed, it started hunting their villages. So their people were too afraid to even sleep. And one of these guys even asked Logan if he knows what that's like. So he was like, nope, but my enemies do. So yeah, Wolverine's ready to show this thing that he's as much of a threat to it as it is to the local tribe. And not even so much for getting payback for the sake of the zebra people, but Wolverine's pissed because he's supposed to be out here on vacation. He was trying to unplug and disappear. So yeah, he's ready to take out his frustration on this thing. Then out of nowhere, it catches a headshot from Nick Fury. And the thing is, Fury, he's come to recruit Wolverine and get him to join up with a handful of others because he has a plan to get things back on track after the fallout. But to his surprise, Wolverine really has no clue about what's happened to the rest of the world. So Fury tells him, while you were down here, disconnected, the entire world has lost its mind. Worse than that, it's on its last leg. I'm here to recruit you, Logan. I need you. America needs you. So Logan tells him, hate to break it to you, bub, but I'm Canadian. So Fury tells him, bad news on that front. I'm sorry to say there really isn't a Canada anymore. So I figured you might make an exception. So following this, we find Wolverine aboard Fury's helicarrier, where next Fury tells him and a handful of others, we're estimating that 100 million people are already dead, but I suppose we should be grateful. Asteroid M came in at an angle and detonated above Quebec, bad for all of North America and most of Northern Europe and Asia, though it probably spared a couple billion lives in India and Southern Asia. But the fact remains, what we knew as the West probably has less than a week before it's gone for good. And those millions very quickly become billions. So Fury goes on to tell Wolverine and the others he was only able to survive because he was in the middle of a mission on the other side of the globe. And he tells Logan the SHIELD fleet had 20 fully functional helicarriers in operation when Asteroid M blew up. But now these are the last 3. So Captain America, he gives a very Captain America-like response because he's like, hey, shouldn't we be focused on helping as many as we can over there? So Fury tells him, Cap, the EMP it released was strong enough to fry absolutely everything. There isn't a working phone, computer, light bulb, train, plane, or power plant for thousands of miles that will ever work again. The only way to save people is to find some way to turn the lights back on, which is exactly what we're doing. This isn't a military operation, gentlemen. It's a heist, and that's the target, Tunguska Station. We're 100 miles out from it now, and if our intel is correct, it's the home of the only cold fusion seed reactor to ever exist. 2 problems, of course. It ain't ours, and it is theirs, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, which we believe is currently being run by Mastermind. And as it stands, this begs the question of how did the station survive the EMP blast, which they don't know at this time, but we'll find out in a little bit. So next, Fury tells them that he'll be running the mission from the sky, while cover is provided by Clay Quartermain, Maria Hill, and Dum Dum Dugan. And while they're in the 3 helicarriers up above, Captain America will head down with Winter Soldier, Wolverine, and a strike team to head into the base. So for a moment, Nick Fury asked everyone, "Can I count on you?" And everybody's like, "Yeah," except for Wolverine. He's just like, "Well, what else are we gonna do?" So classic Nick Fury gives them the old school send-off, as he tells them, "Everyone say your prayers, get right with God, and be ready to do your job." And as they approach their destination, 20 minutes later, one of the helicarriers is just blown out of the sky. So right away, Fury's like, "Where did that come from?" Only for Dum Dum Dugan to confirm the attack came from Clay's helicarrier. So Fury radios over to Clay, only to hear Mastermind speaking through him, as Clay's helicarrier turns towards theirs. So Fury tells Cap and the others they've got to jump now. Which from here, this makes what was already a small team even smaller, because now it's just Cap, Bucky, Wolverine, and a fraction of a SHIELD strike team. But as it turns out, when they touch down and regroup, come to find out they're not too far away from the station. So to continue with the mission, everyone splits up so they can get in closer and regroup at the north side. And as they make their way in, Bucky makes sure to tell everyone to be careful out there, because they don't know what they're walking into. And as soon as these guys split up, we start to see members of the group get picked off one by one. And it's not really a secret as far as who's taking them out, because we know who each of these guys are at a glance. But with all the SHIELD agents being taken down quietly and quickly, this causes Bucky to realize when he makes his way down and he doesn't see anyone else there. This causes him to quickly realize that something's gone wrong. But by the time he figures it out, he gets snatched up. And next, when we go over to Captain America, who's just surfing through the snow down the side of the mountain on his shield. When he gets to the bottom, he takes a moment to behold the beautiful landscape, only to get blindsided and snatched up by some carbonadium tentacles. And following this, when we head back over to Wolverine, at this point he's already sniffed out the 3 of these guys, as well as the blood on each of them. So Wolverine tells Sabretooth to step out so they can get this over with, and Sabretooth lets him know Deadpool wanted to kill Logan from a distance, while Omega Red wanted to gut him up close. But they had to refrain from doing either because their boss wanted to have a word with Logan before they shut his eyes for good. And I gotta tell you, seeing this reminds me of the old Deadpool I remember going into the 90s, back when this guy was way more mercenary than Mouth. And I mean, the Mouth has always been there to some measure, but for those who know, there was a time when Deadpool was the kind of mercenary who was just about getting that money. So if you had a price on your head, that was it. He's gunning for your head and that's all there was to it. So to see this story go back to this Deadpool, this caught me off guard. Because when I first heard about Wolverine Revenge a few months back, all I saw was Jonathan Hickman and Greg Capullo, and I said yes. I didn't look into too much after that, because it's like, what else did I need to know? But yeah, with us getting what seems to be this classic version of Deadpool, that was just a bonus. But following this, the 3 of them end up taking Wolverine in, so he blacks out, only to wake up next to Cap and Bucky, where all 3 of them have bombs planted in their chests. And it's not too long before Mastermind shows up to let them know the details and explain to Wolverine how he went through a number of permutations and combinations of Omega Red's death spores just to stunt Wolverine's healing factor long enough to get the bomb inside of him and behind his ribcage. So right away, Bucky tells Mastermind if this is some kind of plan to blackmail them or coerce them into helping him out, then he's wasting his time, because that's not going to happen. But Wolverine knows right away that's not at all what this is. But instead, it's more like these guys are just playing with their food. And he's not surprised to see this from the likes of them, though he did expect better from Colossus, who steps in and immediately addresses the heist Wolverine came to pull off. Because the way he sees it, Logan and the others, they just want to take the seed reactor because they think it's the right thing to do, as if the world just owes it to the West. So for a moment here, Wolverine's like, "Oh, so you put a bomb in my chest just to lecture me?" So Colossus tells them, like, perhaps I should let you go home to prepare your people for a cold winter and bury those who don't survive it. Which, according to Nick Fury, that's gonna take the millions of deaths into billions. So Deadpool butts in and he's like, "Oh yeah, the bombs, that was my idea. Think of it as a deterrent. See, I got my finger on the naughty button, just in case you decide not to leave. But between you and me, I hope you don't, cause I really wanna mash it." So next, they end up setting Wolverine, Cap, and Bucky free. So Cap and Bucky get up out of there, but Wolverine, he stays behind, while telling them he's not gonna make the trip, but they should go and let everyone know what happened here today. So next, Wolverine tells Colossus, like, "You want me to come up there, or you gonna come down here?" so you can explain yourself. Cause it doesn't make sense how the EMP took out the lights everywhere surrounding this area, but miraculously their lights stayed on. So Colossus tells him this was thanks to Unis the Untouchable, who sacrificed himself to protect this place. So next Deadpool's like, oh, there's the theme for today. Everybody's gotta go sometime. Better go out with a bang, I say, as he pulls out his remote with a Captain America button, a Bucky button, and a Wolverine button. So he detonates Bucky first, because you know, Deadpool, he likes Cap more. But just after that, Cap, he gets it too. So next, Wolverine starts clawing his way into his chest to get his bomb out. Because as soon as he does, he's gonna make every last one of them pay. But as Wolverine is tearing himself apart, Colossus tells him, I wish it didn't have to be this way, Logan. But it does. Someone must lose. And this day, it is the West. And it is you, old friend. As Deadpool hits that button, Wolverine's insides come blasting out. And after this, Colossus and the others leave, with plans to take the seed and relight their half of the world. But after they go, the puddle of Wolverine's remains rejuvenate and bring him back together. Because now, it's time to get revenge. Alright, so coming back, we pick up with Wolverine, who at this point is the only man still standing from Nick Fury's last-ditch effort strike team. Or as it would seem, because come to find out, after what appeared to be a very heroic death on the helicarrier, Nick Fury is yet still alive. And Wolverine discovers this when he gets back to honor those who have fallen, because when he gets there, he picks up Nick Fury's scent. So he tells Fury to come on out. So when Fury comes out, he starts giving this speech like, oh, the ones who we've lost, they're the lucky ones. But right away, Wolverine's like, you sent the life model decoy, didn't you? And Fury's just like, yep, that was the last one I had too. So Wolverine's more or less like, man, Fury, you ain't shit. But at the same time, he knows Fury, so he's just like, why am I not surprised? And knowing Fury, he's probably lying and he got one more tucked away somewhere. But in the case of Cap, Bucky, and countless others, they put their lives on the line for real. And now they're all gone, which at this point just leaves Fury and Logan. And it's not long before Logan's like, okay, what are we gonna do now? Only for Fury to tell him, there's nothing to do. We failed. The Empire has fallen, and now, if we're lucky, only a couple 100 million people on this continent will die. All that's left of the Great American Experiment is less than 20 nuclear subs rolling into deep water. And I give those good men a few months before they're warlords and pirates. I've seen the horror of one world war, faced my worst nightmares in the jungle, and endured the cold hell of the Cold War. I promise you, this is gonna be worse. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna find myself a nice bottle of bourbon, crawl into a hole with my best gun, then someday, soon enough, I'll see my friends on the other side. So Logan just tells him, well, when you do, tell him I said you're only late because you're a terrible drunk, and an even worse shot. Which right there is like, hey, leave it to Logan to know what to say to talk somebody out of a dark place. So next, Fury asks Logan, what about him? What is he gonna do? So Logan just gives him this look just before the title screen jumps up. Because this is Wolverine Revenge. What do you think he's gonna do? Knit a sweater or a scarf? Like, come on, man. So following this, we jump forward 3 months, where we find Wolverine making his way to the Dakotas. But as he closes in, a Jeep pulls up, because before he gets too close, he's stopped by Danny Moonstar, who Logan admits he wasn't expecting to see here. And instead of Danny giving Logan the warm welcome, she accuses him of trying to sneak by. So Logan tells her he wasn't sneaking anywhere, he was just heading towards the only light that he saw burning at night. Because like we were told before, when Asteroid M came crashing down and Magneto died, it released an EMP that took out all the power in the world. So for Wolverine, of course this got his attention, but mainly because he's looking for a specific person. And Logan knows if this place has power, it's likely because of him. So he cuts to the chase with Danny, and he tells her, you guys got power while no one else does. I think I know why. And the why is why I'm here. So Danny just tells him, if this person, if he doesn't want to talk to Logan, then she's gonna have to make him leave. And as soon as she says that, a bunch of demon bears show up. And demon bears, they've been around in Marvel Comics for the longest, going all the way back to New Mutants Volume 1, where back then it was really just one demon bear, but over the years we would see a number of others pop up in issues of X-Force and Spider-Man, but originally it all goes back to Danny Moonstar. And really all you need to know in relation to this story is that they feed off of fear and negative emotions, they can teleport, they're insanely strong, they can maim you physically or just completely bypass your body and strike through to your soul. And in any instance I can think of, they're always connected to the Badlands. But the whole idea of how they're created, it's always been kind of weird to me, because sometimes two people will be merged into one, or they'll just take them as prisoners. But in this case, it would seem like Dani Moonstar either has control, or these demon bears just listen to her. So she tries to use them to threaten Logan, but he just tells her that he knows demon bears love fear, and they can smell it from a world away, but that ain't his scent, and he's not leaving until he gets to talk to the guy who he came here to see, who as it turns out is sitting in the Jeep right now, and that person is Forge. So needless to say, Wolverine stuck around until Forge heard him out. And after that, when we jump forward 2 days later, at this point Wolverine's already told Forge what he's up to. And between these two guys, it couldn't be any more different, because as we know, Wolverine, he's after revenge. And as for Forge, after the world ended, he decided to build something new and welcome those in who could see the dream for what it was. And as far as Forge is concerned, he doesn't think Wolverine's path to revenge is going to end well for him, but even still, he's sticking around to help an old friend. So what they end up doing is making their way to the crash site of Asteroid M, where at this point there's really nothing left but a huge crater, because all of Magneto's true believers, they already came here to take the remains of Asteroid M for themselves, since they saw them as holy trinkets. And because this place is all cleared out, it has Wolverine like, well, how do you know we're gonna find what we came here for? Which, as it turns out, is the body of Magneto. So Forge tells him he did a scan as soon as they got here, and Magneto is right underneath their feet. So Wolverine's then like, okay, so you got some high-tech doodad we can dig him up with? And Forge is just like, I do. And he tosses him a shovel and tells Wolverine to start digging. So Wolverine does, and eventually they find Magneto's body. And the main thing Logan wanted from here was Magneto's helmet. So he hands it to Forge. Forge takes a look, he examines it, and he tells Logan that he can make it work. And following this, next we head over to a city that's name has been erased, where we find a stranger who's making his way to see Mastermind. Because since the fallout, Mastermind has completely taken over this place. He has absolute control over everyone here. They all serve him. It's like a post-apocalyptic Diddy party. And it's here where the stranger approaches, asking Mastermind for the location of Sabretooth, Deadpool, and Omega Red, because the stranger already knows where Colossus is. So Mastermind tells him Rasputin cast them out. He thought they were beneath him, and given the fact that this stranger happens to know this much already, it has Mastermind curious to see what else is in this stranger's mind, because he knows where his companions are, but instead of giving up his secrets, he's gonna take the secrets of this poor defenseless stranger. But when Mastermind tries to go into this guy's head, he tosses, he turns, he grunts, only to then pull back his hood and reveal that he's Wolverine. To no surprise, and he's rocking that refurbished Magneto helmet. So of course when Mastermind sees this, he's terrified. So he then tries to make these ladies defend him, which is sad. But it doesn't even matter, because Wolverine's able to get to him and separate his Mastermind from the rest of his body, which is all Logan really came here for. So he ends up taking his head back to Forge, so he can plug into Mastermind's brain and access his memories so they can figure out the locations of Deadpool, Sabretooth, and Omega Red. And Forge even admits that it was a bit tricky, since Mastermind had done so much work on his brain already, but he gets it to work. And when they see these memories, it confirms that Colossus is where Wolverine thought he was, and Omega Red is not too far from him, though Deadpool on the other hand chose to be in a number of locations, so he could be at any one of them at any time. And in the case of Sabretooth, he's made his home in the desert. So Forge asks Wolverine which one is he heading to first, and Wolverine tells him he's taking care of old business before the new business. But just before he leaves, he asks Forge if he took care of the other thing that he asked for, and Forge tells him that he did it while Wolverine was taking care of Mastermind. And following this, we jump forward to a week later, in the desert, where Sabretooth has made his home, where we find Wolverine pulling up on the motorbike, with his headlight shining bright. And for a moment here, there's a bit of a back and forth between the two of them, because Wolverine asks Sabretooth if he's surprised to see him. And Sabretooth just tells him, nah, not a bit. It'd take a lot more than a bomb in my chest to stop me dead. I figured that means you have half the chance of doing the same. And right there, it's just kind of like, okay, buddy. But Sabretooth goes on to tell Logan that he expected him to come, because Logan always loses and he's always looking to get even. And out of everyone Logan would want to get even with, Sabretooth would be at the top of that list. But he just tells Logan that his revenge is going to start and end right now, because he's not going to let Logan leave here or live long enough to seek revenge anywhere else. So of course, these two get into it and it is a mess. And Creed even tells Logan that he's taking his time with this. He wants to savor the experience. And he's coming with the trash talk too. Saying things to Wolverine like, I own you, always have, always will. And saying things like, everything you ever thought was yours was always mine. And how when he's done here, he's gonna take Wolverine's bike. But Wolverine just tells him, it ain't my bike. I borrowed it from a friend. And I just can't forgive myself when I don't return favors. So next, Wolverine catches him in the gut with his claws. But this time, something's wrong. Because Sabretooth is not healing. Because Wolverine's friend built a neutralizer into the bike's headlamp. So now, Sabretooth's mutant powers are gone. While Wolverine, on the other hand, is healing just fine. So he tells Creed it's been a long time coming, but you're done. And maybe now I'll do to you what you did to me for so very long. Tear you apart, little by little, come back next year, and the year after, and the year after that, and cut another piece off of you. Or we could just go the other way and I could end you right now. So Sabretooth, he's more or less like, I don't need my healing factor, I got this. Just before the two of these guys go back at it. And Sabretooth continues to bleed out. But yeah, these guys are in trouble, cause now Wolverine, he's pretty much turned into Batman. He's had months of prep time, he's got his own version of Lucius Fox, he's ready to get down. Alright, so coming back, we pick up not long after Wolverine had just crossed Sabretooth off of his hit list, which now just leaves Colossus, Omega Red, and Deadpool left to go. But as it stands, Deadpool's a moving target, so going forward, Wolverine's just gotta make his way to Colossus, cause he knows Omega Red won't be too far away. So the plan right now is just that Wolverine will find Deadpool after that. And so to get to Colossus, Wolverine's gotta get on the cargo ship, that at this point is mainly being used for gun running through the Strait of Gibraltar. And in this world where paper money no longer has value, after the fallout caused by the crashing down of Asteroid M, these guys also transit people as well, but they're not letting anyone on the boat unless they have authorization or gold. And it's also one of those things where it's like, these guys, they're not trying to sell the opportunity of transit as well. So for anybody who approaches them, it's like you either got what they want or you don't. So after waiting in line and listening to these guys more or less tell the crowd that they're not doing handouts, Wolverine makes his way to the front and he tells them that he's getting on this boat. And if they plan on taking the trip with him, they'll step aside. And so of course, this led to Wolverine getting on the boat. And following this, it is a long, quiet trip to revenge. Because even after the ship docks, Wolverine has got quite the hike to get to his destination. And as he gets closer, he sees one of the sure signs of confirmation, with the nuclear reactor burning in the distance. But Logan can't help but to notice something's not right, because this reactor is burning a lot brighter than it should be. And as it would seem, it's just been left deserted to run hot and melt down. But Wolverine quickly finds out that it hasn't quite been deserted when Omega Red pops up on him with a surprise attack. And much like we saw with Sabretooth, Omega Red is not surprised that Wolverine survived being blown up from the inside out. But instead, he's looking at Wolverine like, oh, you must crave pain. That's what called you here. But Wolverine is just like, pain is nothing on the road to revenge. And he lets Omega Red know that he's just a speed bump on that road. And throughout this fight between the two of them, we find out that this power source that they have, that was made possible by Unus the Untouchable, sacrificing his life, it's not going to last much longer. And as Omega Red would put it, the power source was incompatible with the furnace. And we'll talk more about the details of the reactor in a little bit. But in the here and now, with Wolverine fighting Omega Red, he's already impaled Wolverine with his carbonadium tentacles, injecting a plague into his stomach, only for Wolverine to cut himself free and push right through the pain. To where next, he takes one of the broken tentacles, wraps it around Omega Red's neck, and he pulls till he hears it crack. Which from here, X's another member of the new Brotherhood of Evil Mutants off of the list. And now, with Wolverine knowing without a doubt that this reactor has gone bad and this place is melting down, he's just like, hey, maybe I should leave a warning sign to let people know not to come too close. So as a warning sign, he just ends up hanging Omega Red by his own broken tentacle. So if anybody heads this way, they'll see him and be like, oh, maybe we should not go this way. But as Wolverine heads closer to the reactor, he sees someone standing at the top. And as soon as he sees this silhouette, he's just like, yeah, of course. So he makes the climb all the way up there so he can have a chat with this someone who is none other than Deadpool. And for a moment here, he just looks at Wolverine like, what? No flowers? And Wolverine tells him, oh, I had some, but they died along the way. like almost everything else on this godforsaken planet. But right here, instead of these two just fighting on site, they just sit down and have a conversation here on the top of this reactor, which is burning their clothes and their skin away. And right here, Deadpool, he opens up quite a bit, because he tells him he does feel bad about what happened as far as Asteroid M crashing down and creating this huge EMP, even though he had nothing to do with it. I mean, it still sucks. So next, Wolverine asks him what's wrong with the reactor. So Wade tells him he doesn't know. Perhaps it was a stupid plan, because after they installed it, it was leaking radiation every week or so. And now it's at the point where it's belching fallout every 20 minutes. So he tells Wolverine, like, you'll see. But right after that, Deadpool admits that he feels terrible about what he did. And he goes on to say, maybe I could live with it if everything turned out okay. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen. I chose poorly, which is nothing new, but normally I do a pretty good job of getting over regret, or just pushing the pain down until I forget that it's there. But not this time. It's too much. So Wolverine's just like, well, I suppose that settles it then, referring to the argument that people like him and Wade never pay for their sins, and that they just heal and move on. So after this, Deadpool just gets up, and he prepares to take his swan dive into oblivion. But before he does, he tells Logan, I'll see you on the other side, and I'm sorry I blew up your friends. But just as Wade leans forward to take that dive, Wolverine grabs the back of his belt, and he tells him, sorry, I just can't watch you do this. And it just has Wade overjoyed that Wolverine saved him, like, oh, you don't want me to die. And Wolverine tells him that this isn't the answer. So right there, Deadpool's just like, oh, this means you want us to team up one last time and right all our wrongs? Because if that's the case, Deadpool's like, I'm with it. So before they get down from here, Wolverine asks him, do you think someone who's done all the things we've done can be forgiven? And Deadpool's just like, yeah, you know what? I guess I do. So after hearing this, Wolverine just pushes Deadpool inside of the reactor. And he's like, I don't. And it's wild because he just saved this man's life, only so he could kill him himself. And man, I'm not gonna front. The first time I read this, Wolverine had me going too. But after seeing this, I was like, you know what? The story is called Wolverine Revenge. And I mean, it's not like he's out here on a forgiveness tour. So it only made sense that he'd kill Wade. And following this, we jump forward 1 week later, where we find Logan digging a grave. And it's crazy how this is set up, because Wolverine is digging this grave just outside of the home where Colossus is staying. And when he's done, he just calls out to him like, hey, I know you see me in there. It's not like I'm trying to hide. And he's more or less like, how are we gonna do this? You coming out, or are you gonna make me come in? So he steps outside, and I gotta say, it's kind of funny looking at comic book size accurate Wolverine standing in front of Colossus. And Logan even jokes about it a bit here, because he looks up like, man, you gotten bigger. But for a moment here between the two of them, there's a bit of an exchange, where on one hand, Colossus is telling Logan to go home, because he doesn't want it to end like this, while on the other hand, Logan's asking if anyone's inside. When he tells him there is, Logan's just like, okay, I'll make sure to mark your grave so they know where to find you. But this whole talk is like the calm before the storm, to where eventually you see Colossus' skin convert to its organic metal, Wolverine's popping his claws, and the next thing you know, they're going at it. Because it's like these guys have known each other for years. And another thing that kind of got me here is like this moment where Colossus, he grabs Wolverine's face and he just chucks him. And it just had me like, oh, he remembered the fastball special. Though, I mean, before it used to be a consensual move. But nonetheless, Hickman and Capullo really sell this fight as one that feels like it's between two guys who've known each other for years. Where on one hand you have Colossus, who's defending the idea of him having to do what he had to do, given the circumstance that the world fell into. While on the other hand you have Wolverine, who feels betrayed, and especially because someone like Colossus, and I mean you could say the same for Nightcrawler, they're like the last members of the X-Men, who you would expect to go down a dark path. And I'm sure at some point we'll learn that there's more to it as far as Colossus, because I mean, it's gotta be. And I mean, we kinda get that here, just after Wolverine gets a clean slice out of him, because he ends up telling Logan, sometimes you have to pick a side, even allies that you despise, because it's what's best for your family. So Logan tries to tell him here, I was your family, but Colossus is just like, no, you were my friend, and that was not enough. So at this point, I can only imagine that he did all this for his sister, Illyana, or maybe even his brother. Though I'm not really sure what family this Colossus has left, but just after he tells Wolverine that he was his friend, and that was not enough, Colossus just rips his arm off, which right away has me thinking about the multiple times that we've talked about Wolverine being dismembered. And when we do, I usually see someone asking, how did he rip his arm off? His bones are adamantium. And someone's gotta tell him, yeah, his bones are adamantium, but his joints, or his tendons, ligaments, or organic. And in the case of ball and socket joints, you don't need to break the adamantium, you just need it to give a little, and everything else is gonna tear. So to me, I've always seen it as possible, but I'll admit when Colossus does it here, I didn't see it coming. But just before he goes for the kill, he tells Logan, "I'm sorry it ended this way." And Logan tells him, "Yeah, me too." Just before he uses that other hand, that also has adamantium claws, and he puts them right through Colossus' skull. And after that, Wolverine just picks up his arm, pops it back in, lets it heal up, just before he carries Colossus over to his grave. That's been sitting over there waiting on him. So I can only imagine after this, who's left behind in that house, because we just might be seeing their revenge story really soon. Alright, so coming back, this picks up 20 years after the death match between Wolverine and Colossus, which like we saw at the time was Wolverine's last stop on his revenge tour, with him killing Deadpool, Omega Red, and Mastermind. So now there's really nothing left for him to do except try to go back to somewhat of a normal life, in a world that's still not so normal anymore, as a result of what began with Asteroid M falling out of orbit and detonating above Quebec. And as we pick up with Logan, we're told here, the old world was gone, and a new one had risen in its place. It was not some pale reflection of what had passed, a remembrance of what was. It couldn't be, because while people are resilient, societies are not. Almost everyone had moved on and forgotten what was. Almost everyone. And that applies here in so many ways. And not just in the case of remembering the past, but it's also very true as far as societies forgetting what happened before, neither making the same mistakes, or not even thinking about things that couldn't have been ignored 20, 30, or 50 years ago. But it's here where we find Wolverine making his way back to the Light's shadow, the territory of the people, which as we're told is an outpost for rangers, ranchers, thieves, and explorers. And really you can just think of this place as like an evolution of what we saw in issue 2, back when Wolverine went to go find Forge, and given that basically the rest of the world had lost power. At the time, Wolverine just made his way towards the Light because they had power when no one else did. So as you could imagine, 20 years later, everything Forge had done up to that point, it's just expanded and grown to benefit way more people, and generations of people at that. But when Wolverine gets here and he walks into the saloon, he comes across some really interesting faces. And I wish there was more time spent here so we can find out who specifically some of these people are, because in some cases it's really obvious, but in other cases it's like I need an explanation on how do we get to this. But nonetheless, when Wolverine gets here, he's treated like a hero. As soon as he walked in the door, they're raising glasses for him, everyone knows his name, which is the kind of place you want to go sometimes, and when he sits down the bartender tells him the drink's on the house. And it's kind of funny how Wolverine responds saying, "You see me reaching for my wallet?" Which lets us know that it's a regular thing, almost like the demon bear drinking a beer. And there's a moment here where we see Wolverine greeted by a couple of kids who knew he was going to be back today. And they ask him if he took care of the bad guys, so he tells them he did, and how it's not something anybody has to worry about anymore. And when he reaches into his bag and hands these kids some badges, some sheriff badges, we also see that Wolverine's wearing a badge himself. And it just goes to show us how Wolverine is adjusted to this world at this stage in his life. But after this, when he steps out on the rooftop to have a conversation with Forge, he jokingly asks him if he's out here enjoying his handiwork, because again, if it wasn't for Forge, these people wouldn't have power. And I do imagine for Forge, there's probably a bit of truth to that, as far as him admiring his handiwork, because the blackout basically gave Forge the opportunity to build something over time for this community and watch it grow. But when Wolverine gets here, he tells Forge the last of the Reavers were holed up in an old military silo. Tough nut to crack, but I did find something special inside. So he reaches in his bag and he pulls out an old bottle of whiskey from 40 years before the blackout. So for a moment here, Forge is like, what are we drinking to? But Logan, he doesn't need an occasion to drink to, because to him it's like, come on man, let's just enjoy this bottle. But Forge tells him here, look at what we've done, old friend. Made a place for ourselves. Saved what we could, saved enough to build a new world. You should be proud. You should be content. Maybe after all these years, it's time to forget the past, let it all go. Bury it, once and for all. Which right there is like the first hint that lets us know that something from Wolverine's past isn't quite done yet. So next, we see him head off to a remote location, 1 week after his conversation with Forge, and it's been 1 year since he was here last. And as he makes his way here, there's a bunch of dead, rotting animals hung up all around this place. And we'll talk about why that's a thing in a little bit. And when he gets here, he has this lamp in his hand that might look a little familiar, like a motorcycle lamp we saw a while back, because Wolverine's come here to see Sabretooth. And man, I'm gonna tell you right now, Sabretooth looked like he's trying to give a whole new definition to the term chopped and screwed. Because if you guys remember back when we covered Wolverine issue 2, It was at that time when Forge built a neutralizer into the headlight of Wolverine's bike, which wasn't really Wolverine's bike, he was just borrowing it, but when this light shined on Sabretooth, it neutralized his healing factor, and that only applied to Sabretooth. So you can just imagine with how crazy and visceral their fights get. This fight by itself left Sabretooth in bad shape. But also at that time, Wolverine told him, "I'll do to you what you did to me for so very long. Tear you apart, little by little. Come back next year, and the year after, and the year after that, and cut another piece off of you." So basically after all this time, Wolverine is still standing on business. You even have Sabretooth sitting here in the professor's chair, and there's really not much he can do about the situation. But right here, Wolverine says something really interesting, because he's like, "I know that Forge's neutralizer is supposed to be permanent, but at some point, I figured that your healing factor would adapt or something. I guess now we know the thing only has 2 speeds, working or not. But it never hurts to play it safe, does it?" And Sabretooth's more or less like, okay, maybe one day his healing factor will come back and things will go back to how they were. But Wolverine's just like, "You really think I won't put you out of your misery before then?" And it's like, it's crazy to see here that Sabretooth's healing factor is just broken. But also with Wolverine making the threat of just killing Sabretooth and getting it done with, Sabretooth is just like, no, that's not gonna happen. And he can see it in Wolverine's eyes. Because for years, Sabretooth would just pop up on Wolverine, and at least once a year, and do something horrific like kill someone who Logan cares about, which is why he's doing this to Sabretooth now. So because he knows Wolverine's gonna stick to the slow torture, he's more or less just like, alright, let's get on with it. Only for Logan to tell him, not today. And now it is pretty crazy that Wolverine would just come out here and not go through with the torture session, but there's a lot more at play here that we'll talk about in a little bit. But right here, Sabretooth tells him, like, don't go soft on me. You've cut too deep for too long to think this ride just stops. There's no forgiveness on this path we're on. So Wolverine tells him, "You think forgiveness is a thing that will ever exist between us, Creed? I killed the others because they had it coming. Yes, that was revenge, but it was also justice. This is something else entirely." And he tells him here that it's history, which just goes back to the whole eye for an eye thing. So again, Sabretooth is like, "I'm gonna get out of this chair." And Wolverine's like, "Nah, that's not happening." But even with Creed admitting that he gets it, he still goes off for a moment here. And he asks Wolverine what's he waiting for. And he even tells him again to get on with it. And just like Wolverine said before, he tells him here, not today. So as he leaves, Sabretooth tries to hit him with the, "What's wrong with you? Your stomach getting weak? You're not man enough to do the job?" And as Wolverine walks out the door, he just tells Sabretooth that he's not interested. So just after he leaves, we find out that Sabretooth had some company hidden away. And he tells them here, it worked. Normally he can sniff anything out, but the smell of death overpowers his senses. It's too tough to cut through. So the Wolverine didn't know you were here, but now you know what he is and what you're up against. And that's why when Wolverine was making his way here, he saw the dead coyotes and animals just hanging up and rotting, so it can cover the scent of his guests, the Omega Clan, as well as another person who's hanging back in the shadows who we'll see more of later. And these 3 are the genetic seed of the Omega Red that Wolverine killed so many years ago. But even with Sabretooth bringing these guys in to kill Wolverine, to them this is about getting revenge. And with these guys you have another Omega Red, Omega Black, and Omega White. And for them, after coming here and seeing Wolverine, Omega Black is just like, that guy doesn't seem that tough. And Sabretooth is just like, maybe the Omega Clan is made of sterner stuff than Omega Red. But I swear, the last thing you need to be is overconfident. Trust me. But eventually this Omega Red is like, okay, we've seen him. Can we kill him now? And Sabretooth just tells them if they're ready to go down that road. And he goes on to ask, are you? To where then a tall, shadowy figure in the back is just like, yes. And so from here, when we jump over to Wolverine, he sniffed out that he's got some company. Because now the Omega Clan's caught up to him while he was making a stop to let his horse get a drink. And these guys make it clear right off the bat that they've come to make Wolverine pay for the sins of his past. And they waste no time trying to serve judgment. But it's pretty clear to Wolverine right away who these guys are here to get revenge for. So he asks them who are they supposed to be, the Omega Reds? So that's when Omega Black makes it clear as far as the details of who they are exactly. And I gotta say, Omega Black, he's got a real smug face. He just looks like the type who would talk like, well, I'm Omega Black and he's Omega White. Like, he just seems like a very punchable kind of guy. But nonetheless, when these guys attack, they basically got the same abilities as Omega Red, with the exception of a few extra tricks here and there, but it still doesn't do them any good. Because when Omega White gets a hold of Wolverine, and he tries to fill him with all sorts of diseases and infections, which he does, Wolverine just cuts this dude's hands off, drop kicks him off to the side, and he looks up like, who's next? So seeing this has Omega Black like, okay, he's quicker than I thought. But also at this time, Wolverine notices that they've got these floating cameras, so he asks what are the cameras for? So Omega Black tells him, that's for our audience, as he goes in to pump 6 different toxins and hundreds of thousands of bacteria into Wolverine. Only for Wolverine to continue the conversation about the camera, because he tells this guy, since they're out here doing this for an audience, is there anyone you want to say goodbye to? And this dude is just looking at Wolverine like, how are you even alive right now? And Omega Black even tells him here, I'm pumping 6 different toxins and hundreds of thousands of bacteria into you right now. Why won't you die? And Wolverine's just like, isn't it obvious? It's because I got such good manners. So I'll die. But you first. As he puts his claw straight through Omega Black's head, which now basically leaves Omega Red as the last man standing, or Omega Red Jr. But it's right here where he goes on to tell Wolverine, when he found us, we thought he was mad. But now I see, he was right. You must be erased from this world. And I am going to do it. Which in a way, this reminds me about what was said earlier as far as society not remembering the past, or in some cases not even knowing the past. Because this Omega clan, these guys were done from the moment they thought they was going to run up on Wolverine and do to him what the original Omega Red couldn't. So now that'll be the last lesson they ever learn. But as it stands, one of these guys are still breathing. Because like we saw earlier, Wolverine didn't kill Omega White, he just disarmed him. And I imagine it's because he intentionally wanted to keep one of these guys alive so he could get some answers. So Wolverine asks him here, what did Omega Red mean when he said, when he found us? Because Logan wants to know who is he. He wants to know who sent these guys. So Wolverine puts the choke on him with his own carbonadium tentacles. It is messed up because the dude has no hands. So it's not like he can stop the choke from getting any tighter. All he can do is just sit there and choke. So Wolverine goes on to tell him, you didn't have to come after me. You chose this. Just know, I can make this last all day. I'm the best there is at what I do. So right there, Omega White just starts singing like a bird. And he's like, Creed, Creed, it was Creed. So after hearing this, Wolverine, he ends this guy's suffering just before he looks into the camera and tells Sabretooth, I know you can hear me, so listen up. I changed my mind. You're not gonna have to wait a year, Creed. I'll be seeing you soon. So right there, Sabretooth is just like I tried to tell him, but they wouldn't listen. And he asked the other visitor, do you see what he is? A force of nature, relentless and inevitable. And Sabretooth even admits that he played his part in making Wolverine who he is today. Because after everything he'd done to Logan in the past, it only made him more vicious. And he also admits that perhaps bringing in the Omega clan was a mistake, because they were just poor copies of the real thing. But then he goes on to tell this last visitor, no, it'll take someone like you, someone who wants, who needs revenge, just as bad as he does. It takes a vengeance that you can't stop thinking about, a taste you can't get out of your mouth. I know you have it in you. I can see it. Hate, burning you up. Honestly, I don't know how you stand it. Him standing there, breathing, living, while your father lies buried in the ground. Because this next dude is the son of Colossus, and he just happens to have a soul sword. So you mean to tell me we got magic and Colossus, a 2-in-1? But in a way, we kinda knew that something like this was coming. Because just before Colossus and Wolverine had their fight to the death, they had a bit of a brief conversation. Where Wolverine asked, is anyone in the house? And Colossus told him yes. So Wolverine was like, alright, cool. I'll make sure to mark your grave so they know where to find you. But yeah, even back then, it just sounded like whoever was in that house was gonna come back for Wolverine years later. And that's precisely what we're getting. So yeah, I can't wait to see this guy get down. Alright, so just as a really quick recap, going into Wolverine Revenge issue 5. This story takes place on a post-apocalyptic world, where as a result of Magneto's death and the asteroid M going down, hundreds of millions of people were killed, and with an EMP blast covering the whole planet at the time of Magneto's death, everyone across the world lost power. So that caused a lot of people to do what they had to do, just to survive and protect their loved ones. But at the start of the series, we really just jumped in with Nick Fury putting together a team, so they could go retrieve what seemed to be the last device, capable of producing energy on Earth, only for his team to get intercepted by Colossus, Omega Red, and Sabretooth, and some others who at the time were referred to as the New Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. And with how it played out, these guys killed everybody, with the exception of Wolverine, who survived, and I mean really most of the killing was on Deadpool's hands. But this then led to Wolverine going on his revenge tour and hunting each and every one of these guys down, one by one. And after killing Colossus, he had basically left Sabretooth alive with a shutdown healing factor so Logan could kill Creed slowly over time. And years later, going into issue 4, this is where we found out that Creed had been working with a number of legacy individuals to help them go after Wolverine, since Creed couldn't really do it himself. So this is when he brought in the Omega clan, who are all clones based off of the genetics of Omega Red, in addition to Nikolai Rasputin, the son of Colossus, who basically has the same powers as his father, with the additional training from his aunt Ilyana Rasputin. So now he's here with a soul sword, and he's ready to get the revenge that he's basically been thinking about his whole life. And now the first thing we do going back into this, we're thrown into a flashback, which shows us a memory between young Nikolai and his father. And I really like that we get to see this because something Colossus had said before, and we'll go back into that in just a moment. But in this flashback, him and his son are just watching the sunset, as he tells him this is how it's supposed to be. Field and farm as far as the eye can see. You put your hands in the ground and smell how rich the soil is, and know that anything you plant will grow. And then the harvest, all Nikolai. To feed yourself, to feed others, to provide what's actually necessary. That is life as it is meant to be lived. And this is where the young Nikolai told his dad. Not sure Aunt Yana feels that way, and it's like, man, Aunt Yana, that's adorable. And Colossus told him, yes, well, your aunt and I disagree on many things, son, maybe everything except for you. So next, the young Nikolai, he brings up his father's past. And he's like, I'm not supposed to say anything because she knows you don't like it. But Yana says you used to be a hero. So this is where Papa Piotr tells his son, I was strong, stronger than most. I suspect one day you'll be the same. But I wasn't the hero. I was just a man forced into situations bigger than myself, and forced to do things that I now regret. This life we have now is better than that old one, Nikolai. I'd rather be your father than a hero any day of the week. Now go inside, wash up, and I'll start working on dinner. And when he says this, the kid starts to go inside, and in the background, you can see Colossus holding his head like, man, yeah, I done some stuff. But just before his son goes back inside, he turns around and says, hey dad, just so you know, you're my hero. And we all know how things played out after that. But really quickly, I want to point out that I'm glad that we got that flashback, because back when we first saw Colossus in this story, he told Wolverine, Captain America, and the others who had basically came on a mission to steal their power, or better yet their solution to providing power. He told them you believe your cause is right, and therefore your thievery is righteous, that the West is owed it, and we should simply let you take it. And this is something we pointed out at the time, because it's easy to just look at this and say, oh, Wolverine, Captain America, and Bucky Barnes, they're gonna steal this power source and bring it back to the West, and it's gonna save the remaining survivors on the North American continent, because they're the good guys, and the good guys are gonna save us. But the truth is, Colossus, he did what he believed he had to do to save his family, and he wasn't gonna let anybody just walk in and take that away. So yeah, this reminds me a lot of some of the conversations I've had about The Last of Us game, part 1 and 2, because I played them both back to back in like 2022 or 2023, and I enjoyed part 2 more, because the realest thing about any of these stories is the fact that nobody's special, and it's so easy to slip into the trap of falling in love with the main character without realizing some of these people that they're killing are the main character in someone else's story. So yeah, I'm just gonna start that fire and hand it to the comment section. But at this point, coming back to the present day, after Wolverine has just wrecked the Omega clan, he discovers the cameras that are watching him, which lets him know that Sabretooth is behind this. So Wolverine makes his way back to come for him. But what Wolverine doesn't know is that Sabretooth still has company. And when Wolverine gets there, he's brought the neutralizer light that he got from Forge, and he just stands outside like, Creed, what's it gonna be? Am I coming in? Okay, no, he didn't sing it. It was more like Brad Pitt and Troy when he was yelling Hector. But Wolverine gets here and he asks Creed, like, what are we doing? Am I coming in there? Are you coming out here? And that's where Creed comes out in, you know, the professor's chair with Nikolai alongside of him. And as soon as Wolverine sees this, he's like, man, it's like looking at a ghost. And he yells at Sabretooth like, oh, you bringing kids into this? And Sabretooth just frames it as a you reap what you sow kind of thing. And that's where Wolverine just calls a spade, because he tells Creed, I understand now. You're too broken and too beaten to fight your own fights. What a shadow you are, Creed. I've reduced you to nothing. Completely. I gotta tell you, I honestly don't even remember you as anything other than this. So I guess it was always gonna end this way. Me standing over you, and you, my beaten dog. And it's right here, this is where Sabretooth just snaps. And he tells Nikolai to do it now, just like they planned. Because what they have planned is a fastball special, which once again is a really nice callback. I feel like we've been seeing this quite a bit lately. But in this case, with Sabretooth flying at Wolverine, it's basically a death sentence for Sabretooth, because again, his healing factor is shut down. So Wolverine quite literally just tears this guy to pieces. And he's like, everybody has a plan, Creed, till they don't. And after killing Sabretooth after all these years, Wolverine says, I thought it would feel different. I thought after all this time that getting my revenge would make me feel better, complete in some way, but I don't feel nothing but the same anger burning in my heart, like a giant wound that won't heal. Maybe you should think about that, because really he's saying this for Nikolai to hear, and hopefully reconsider before this goes down. But Nikolai is just like, think about it. It's all I think about. Every single day since you killed my father, who was your friend. But don't lecture me like I'm you, some monster with a sea of bodies left in your wake. I've never killed anyone, but seeing you here, finally standing before me, I think I very much have to try. I have to, or I won't be able to sleep at night. And so it's here where Wolverine's like, well, if it matters, I'm sorry about your dad. I do regret it. But Nikolai doesn't care. And it's right there where Wolverine understands that there's no talking this kid out of it. So he asks him how you want to do it. And with the way that Nick responds, you can tell that he came here to kill Wolverine, but he's also prepared to die trying. Because he responds saying, does it matter? This probably only ends one way, in violence and pain, and eventually death. Then you'll heal. So right there, Logan's like, yeah, I suppose that's not really fair, is it? So he picks up Forge's neutralizer, and he shines it on himself. Which at first had me like, man, that's a noble thing to do, because man, it's like he's really out here evening the odds. How honorable. But after doing this, he tells Nick, there you go, fair, in memory of your old man. And when he does this, Nick's like, come then, pay for your sins. So Wolverine leaps out right at him, only for this kid to hit him with the okie doke, because he just stabs the soul sword into the ground, opening a huge gaping portal to Limbo. And this just has Wolverine in midair like, oh, I should have thought about this jump. Because he didn't get enough distance and enough air to clear it. Because he'd already left the ground before this portal was even a thing. So he just goes falling right in. So Nick basically tells Wolverine here, you're going to pay for your sins in a place where such sins belong. In the hell called Limbo. Which I gotta say, this is a smart move on the kid's behalf. Because the soul sword is more powerful in Limbo. But when he goes on to say here, this sword was a gift from my aunt, who raised me after you killed my father. It was forged here in this terrible place that I hate almost as much as I hate you. And right there, it's like, since this is magic sword, it's most powerful when it's used by her. Because it's a physical manifestation of her power, so only she's able to get the most out of it. But we've also seen other people use the soul sword over the years, people like Nightcrawler, Darkoth, who we talked about in the Venom series a while back, and I think Kitty Pryde at one point, though I can't recall off the top of my head. And you also got certain rules where it's like whoever owns the soul sword is the ruler of Limbo, though I'm not sure how much of that applies here, but that's a conversation I want to come back to in a little bit. But during this fight, you just have the soul sword clashing against Wolverine's adamantium claws. So that's where Nick goes for Wolverine's arm. And right here, Logan's just like, I still got metal bones, boy. And I'm not sure why that's so funny to me, but given the fact that Nick even attempted to do this, it's almost like he tried to take Wolverine's arm off here. So next, Logan goes for the old demon's blood in the eye trick, and this just has Nick's eyes burning. And only for a moment here, it's not like anything permanent, but that moment is all Wolverine needs to gain the upper hand. And it comes to the point where it seems like Wolverine's about to put the kid out of his misery. But before he does, the kid asks him, how did it come to this, comrade? And Wolverine responds like he's talking to Colossus. He's just like, I don't know, Petey. It just did. Because keep in mind, there was no formal introduction between these two. So Logan's just calling him Petey. And that's enough to throw Logan off. So the kid can just whack him in the head with the hilt of the soul sword, which turns the tables once again. Because after Nick slashes Wolverine to the ground, Wolverine is just like, go on, do it. It's your right to, and I deserve it. And the kid doesn't even say a word. He just drives the soul sword right through Logan. And he leaves him there, in limbo, with the soul sword sticking out of him. And this is where Logan's narration picks up again. Because he says here, and that's how it always ends. Revenge. Doesn't matter how much you lie to yourself at the start, or how noble you think what you're doing is. Do it long enough, let it consume you, and you will always end up in the same spot. In a hell of your own making. With a little grace, a little mercy, some people might get past it. I hope a clean end will mean that for the kid. But for me, it's just never gonna happen. And this is where Wolverine comes clean. Because throughout this fight, we were led to believe that Wolverine had shut down his healing factor after using Forge's neutralizer. But it's right here, as he gets up, he pulls the soul sword out of himself. And he's like, okay, you got me. I confess. I messed with Forge's neutralizer, so no, I never lost my powers. So yeah, he was fighting with his healing factor intact this whole time. So now that his mouth and his neck are closing back up, he gets up and he's like, hopefully the kid will believe it and move on and heal in a way that I can't and never will. So yeah, this leads us to a couple of things as this wraps up. Cause for one, Wolverine has just basically faked his death, so the son of Colossus would believe that he'd actually got his revenge so he can move on and live his life. And the second thing is, with Wolverine believing that his revenge and really the life that he lived, all of it was gonna end one way. So instead of Logan trying to avoid it, he's like, you know what, I'm gonna do it on my terms. Because he says, revenge led me here, and my nature made sure of it, down a path I was never getting off of. So I guess I got exactly what I deserved. So why not make the best of it? And the next thing we see is Wolverine make his way to the throne down here, and he's like, bad news, pal, you're in my seat. As he throws him the head of the biggest demon who's come after him so far. And this has me thinking like, okay, we've seen other Wolverines go to hell quite a few times, and I'm not really sure how many times this one's been down here, or if he's been to a hell before, but it's like now that he's down here and he has the soul sword, is he technically about to become Limbo's ruler? You guys let me know what you think in the comments. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.